AI workflows that adapt, integrate, and power your systems at pace and scale. Google provides Vertex AI Studio. It transforms your prompts into Google Gemini into actionable APIs and trigger for dynamic workflows. Today, we will explore how to use Vertex AI Studio to build powerful workflow with Google Gemini and integrate them seamlessly with Google Cloud Application Integration. Let's dive in. So what's Vertex AI Studio? It's Google Cloud's cutting-edge platform for managing AI models and workflows. And then we have Google Gemini, a family of next-gen foundation models that powers tasks like natural language understanding, code generation, and more. It comes with intuitive prompt builder where you can experiment and refine prompts in real time. And once your prompt works, deploy it as an API with just a few clicks. And then you can use those APIs to create your workflow integration. And that is what we are going to use in our today's video, where we will generate a prompt and then integrate it using application integration, and let's see how we can do that. Here I have given some system instructions which essentially has all the information that Gemini requires to categorize my PDF document, and then as an example I have given that there will be a user prompt coming in and then only respond with green, blue, miscellaneous or incorrect documentation. Now after you have done this, what you're going to do, you're going to make a save, and then after saving, you can click on this get code part, and then Vertex AI Studio is giving you a lot of samples like in Python, Node.js, Java or curl, where you can go and make call to your prompt itself and see what response comes back. So what I'm going to do, just to test it as a sample, I'm going to open, and in my terminal, I'm going to make call to gcloud and see if my prompt is giving response back or not. I'm going to copy paste the code which was given to me, hit enter, and then voila. Here is my response from Gemini that it is able to identify the document and then going to tell me what is the information or the categorization is. So this time it's green. Cool. Now what I want to do, I want to automate the whole process. Every time there is a file dropped in GCS bucket, I want to trigger the whole thing. So now what we have done is we have created a Gemini prompt, and we want to automate the whole process, that whenever a PDF file is copied or added into a GCS bucket, we want to trigger this prompt generation of classification, and then we want to send this information as an output to our some downstream systems. It can be a database or somewhere else. So that is what we are going to do. We will have a GCS bucket where we will drop the file, and then GCS has a PubSub integration available. Whenever a new file is created, PubSub can create an event, and that event will be sent to application integration, and then application integration can call Gemini prompt which we have created, execute it on the file which we have in GCS, and then generate the output prompt. And this can be called from an API trigger or as an event trigger. In our case, we are using GCS PubSub as an event, but we can also expose the whole process as an API trigger. So we can implement it once and call it multiple times. And that is what we are going to do now. So before we get started, one thing we have to do is we have to create a connector to Vertex AI in application integration. When we go to application integration, we can go to connections and click on create new connection, click on, and then choose a region. Now we are going to select the connector we want to create, and in this case we have Vertex AI, and this time you can enable cloud logging if you want to do it. I'm going to leave it as it is, and the host in our case will be this US Central 1 AI platform googleaps.com, or you can get this information from the get code and go to curl. Within curl you will have that endpoint given to you. So this is your API endpoint which you need to give in the connector setting. So it is US Central 1 googleapis.com. Now this is very important, how you can authenticate to the API itself. So you have two ways of authentication. Either you can use OAuth 2.0 authentication, or you can use a service account. In my opinion, service account is the easiest way. So what you can do is you can create a service account in whichever project you have created your prompt, and then give that service account access to call this API itself. So if I go to required roles, and then you can see the required roles which are required for this API, and these are the roles you need to provide, and that is what we are going to do next. So I'm going to go to my project. Even before I create this, let's open another page and go to IAM, go to service accounts. Let's create a new service account, create and continue, go to roles, and you can give it AI platform admin role or platform predictor. So I'm just going to make it easy. Just give it AI platform admin and Vertex AI administrator. But in production, don't do that. Give it a specific role. Done. Now my account is created. I'm going to make a copy of this. Go back to my connector setup. Select the service account. But this time you will notice we didn't select the service account. So what happened here? So that service account you need to select here. So by default, your connector is going to take compute engine default service account, but we are going to give a different service account here. I'm going to give this, add service account, and continue on. Now this time with these informations, we are going to create the connector and click on create. So now our connector is getting ready. In the meanwhile, let's go and create an integration. So I'm going to go back to my console again, and this time I'm going to select application integration and create an integration. You can use Gemini to create an integration, but let's click on this. I'm going to say go forward, and this time to trigger this integration, I'm going to simply drop an API trigger. Let's call it trigger pause prompt, and now we have to drop a connector. So I'm going to search for connector, select connector, and configure it to use the connector which we have just created. That was pause Vertex AI prompt, which is still getting created. So let's wait for a while and it should be ready. So here you can see my connector is getting ready still. Now it's up and running. So it did the setup, it created the infrastructure, it fetched the schema, and now the connector is ready. I can go back and use it. If I cancel and search for pause Vertex AI prompt again, click on next. And this time, this is important to know that what exactly we want to do. So to do this, we need to go back to so I'm back in my Vertex AI Studio. I'm going back to my prompt, and in my prompt, I'm going to see the code. If I go to curl, here at the end of your API call, you will see something as stream generated content. So this is the action which you need to perform on your APIs, or the method which you are calling on your prompt itself. So that is what we are going to do here. Going to select action, click next, and then select stream generate content. So the API endpoint is available. I'm going to select that and click on done. Now let's join it to the trigger itself. Now there are a few important things to note, that there is a task input for this connector itself. Let's first rename this. Now there is a important thing to note is that there is a connector input payload, and we need to set this up to make this call to our prompt itself. Now if I go to this connector input payload here, that there is a request body and then path parameter. In the path parameter, I need to provide a model string parameter. This is important to note, that what exact information you need to provide here. So if I go to my prompt again, in this, you will notice that your API endpoint is US Central 1 AI Platform Google APIs, which is still here. And then your path will be from projects till your model ID. So we need to provide this information to call. Now model ID for us is Gemini 1.5/002, and then project and all this information. So you need to set this path, and there are multiple ways to do it. You can use multiple variables, get all those variables set up, and create a path parameter. So that is what we are going to do. So let's create some variables here. So the first thing is, we are going to create a variable called as Vertex project ID. And why I am doing that? Because I might be running my integration in some other project, but I might be running my prompt in some other Google Cloud project. So that is why I am giving Vertex AI project ID. But if you notice on the left hand side bottom, there is a project ID. That project ID is for your application integration, not for your Vertex prompt where you are running. So just for the sake of clarity, we are going to call it Vertex project ID, and this time I'm going to make it a configurable variable. It's a config variable, and the value which I want to give here is my Vertex AI project, which I can get from here. This time it is same, but it could be different, so hence we are creating a separate variable. And click on create. The next thing we want is the location ID. So if I go to my curl, so this location ID, we want to create this variable again, and I'm going to go back to this, create another config variable called as Vertex location ID. Again, same thing, I'm going to make it a config variable and then put the location as US Central 1. And create. And the last thing is that we need the model ID, and let's create this. Create another variable, call as Vertex model ID config variable, and our model is Gemini Flash. This, go here, add default value and create. Now before we call this, we need to set up some information. So that is what we are going to do next. To do that, we need a mapper. I'm going to go to data mapping, drag it here. So let's set up another variable, and we call it Vertex path parameter. And we are going to create this path parameter using different config information which we have set. And as an example, it should look something like projects, project ID, and till this model ID. So we need to replace all this variable. That is what we are going to create next. Here, click on open parameter, and we can drop Vertex path parameter, and we need to start setting this value. So we will start setting it up with some hard-coded value, which was the start of our path, which was projects, and then I will leave it as it is and click on save. Now I'm going to concatenate it with a variable, and this time my variable was my config project ID. This was Vertex project ID, and then I'm going to click on save. Now I need to concatenate it with locations, and this time I'm going to add a concatenation, which was concat, and then this time the value will be slash locations and another slash, and save, and then another concatenation this time, and this time it will be the location. Save it, add another concatenation. This time it will be slash publishers slash Google slash models and another slash. I just realized it should be value, not there. We save this, and finally we need to concatenate it with our variable, which is model, Vertex AI model. So what this will do, it will set up our path parameter for project slash Vertex ID slash locations, the location ID, publisher Google models, and the Vertex model ID. Now this is good. Now another thing which we also want to do is that if you look at the connector input payload, other than path parameter, we need to provide some content, and this content is coming from the input which you are giving to your Vertex AI prompt, and this is the value. Just to make my life easier, just to test it that everything works, I'm going to make a copy of this, but once we start getting files from GCS bucket, we will dynamically create it, and we'll see how we can do that. For now, let's just copy this, go back here, create a temp variable and call it request content, and variable type will be none, and JSON, I'm going to copy the sample JSON here so that it can create the schema and also the default value and click on create. And this time I'm going to create request content here and then map it to the content which are required like this. We have set it up. Now let's go and test it. Before that, we need to connect them together. And let's do a quick test. Now to test it, I'm going to trigger it with all my standard values for my config. So you can see in real scenario, you can dynamically replace these also as an input to your integration, which will start calling different integration or different prompt, whichever you have created. So let's click on test. So I think I made a issue with, we set the vertex path parameter, but we forgot to set it into our path parameter here. So very quickly, let's do that. Push it here and then set the path parameter into this. We can also move it up so that once our path parameter is set up, vertex path parameter, we set it into the actual payload content. So let's go and test this again. This time it's able to make a call and we get a response back. And now our response parameter is that something coming back from our Vertex AI prompt, and that is that this time it's green. This is the same output which we got when we called it from curl command. So we are able to call our prompt, but now let's make it more dynamic, that every time a file is dropped into GCS bucket, we want to trigger this whole thing. And let's see how we can do that. So far what we have done, we have created a Gemini prompt, and then we have set up application integration to make call to that Gemini prompt and then get some output to from that prompt itself. Now to make this whole process automated, what we are going to do, we are going to set up a Google Cloud Storage bucket, and whenever a new file or a PDF file is added to this Google Cloud Storage, we are going to get a trigger generated on PubSub, and then based on from PubSub event, we are going to trigger our integration, and that integration is going to generate the output, this prompt itself. So let's get started with this. So now what I have done in Google Cloud Storage, if I go back to buckets, I have created a bucket. You can create a simple bucket. I have selected US Central 1 and storage class as standard, non-public access. It's not accessible from outside. And within that, I have a folder called as Vertex AI samples. And whenever I create a file here, so right now I have a file which I have been using to test my prompt itself. But now the next step is that if I generate and create another PDF file here, and then it will create a PubSub event, and then PubSub event we will consume. Now what we also need, we need a PubSub topic which will be triggered every time a new file is created here. So let's get started with that. I'm at a page documentation which is about configuring PubSub notification for cloud storage. So we will follow these steps and create our notification channel. So first thing, we need to enable API, and I'm going to click on this. This is going to take to your project, and if you have not already created or enabled the API, it is going to enable. For me, it is saying Cloud PubSub API is not enabled on my project, so it's going to enable. But if it is already enabled on your project, then you do not have to do that, but it's always better to come and check. Now the API is enabled. So now let's go back. Now, as of now, you cannot create this notification from console, but there are multiple ways to do that. You can use command line, you can use client library, you can use Terraform, you can call REST API. So I'm going to use command line to enable this notification for my PubSub topic. But before that, I need a topic. So let's go and create PubSub topic. Now I am in my project. I'm going to search for PubSub, and I'm going to create a new topic. I'm going to leave user schema, all those things as by default, not going to change anything. Click on create. Now our topic is ready. So we are going to create configuration. So let's copy this topic name, place this topic name here, and the bucket name, we are going to copy it from our storage. All cool. So now let's copy this command and go back to our console. Copy this, enter the command. Okay, so that it's saying topic already exists and the setup is done. Now the configuration is done. Every time a file is created, we are going to get notified on this topic. Now I am back to my integration. This is what we had prepared previously, where we were triggering it through an API. Now let's add a PubSub trigger, and the topic which I have is this project standalone in prod testing, and then I need to select a service account. So let's use Vertex AI app integration essay, and then we need to grant necessary roles. These are the roles required, PubSub editor and all. So we can directly grant it from here. I'm going to click on grant. So now let's connect this to our data mapping, and just for safe measures, I'm going to publish. Now let's drop a file in our GCS bucket and see what happens. So I'm going to go to my GCS bucket and I'm going to add a new file, upload files, and select this. Now the upload has started. So there is _2 added. So let's go and see if our integration got triggered or not. So we go here, and this time the integration got triggered. And if I see the duration, the timing, it's 3:12 right now, and this is the new integration triggered. So let's go and see the logs. Request parameter cloud PubSub message, and this is where it's showing you the file name, what we got, and this is the information from PubSub coming in, and then the rest is all fine because we have not used this file yet. So the response and everything is hard coded as last time we did, because we have put the data content by hard coding it. Now we are going to use this PubSub message, and if you want to see, this is the PubSub message which is coming. Let's go to our integration and start utilizing this PubSub trigger itself. Now when we created this cloud PubSub trigger, there was an auto-generated variable created, which is cloud PubSub message. If I expand this, there you can see the data, the attribute, message ID, publish time, ordering key, and all those things. And the data, if you want to see, I can go to the logs again, and we can create a temp variable so that we have the whole payload available to us. This is the data which is coming to us, and if I copy this, so what most of the times I like to do, I create a temp variable so that I can get the more information from the schema itself. So I'm going to call it PubSub trigger message data. Variable type can be none, we don't have to change it to JSON, add that sample here and create. So now what happened is we created this PubSub data. In this there is published data, string, message type, attribute, object generation, event type, bucket ID, event type, payload, and all those things. So you can get all this information out of it. If you want to see the object data which came, this was the data. Inside the data there was storage and all this information, but we are more interested into the file name. What's the file name? So for us, this is the file name, and then based on this file name we can create the whole path. And if you remember, if I go back in my request content, we were giving the path of our file, which is the file URI. This is the path we want to set, and then if we have this information of the file name, then we can easily create it using string concatenation, and then with that we will be able to create the message which we want to send it to our Gemini prompt. Now to do this, what I want to remove this connection here, and I want to drop a data mapper. Let's call it PubSub data mapping, and open this. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cloud PubSub message and drop it into PubSub trigger message data. And then once this is done, we can start utilizing this PubSub message trigger data and get the information out, which is that we are most interested into the object ID. If you remember, if I show you again, this is the object ID which we want from our message which is coming from PubSub. So it's already having Vertex AI sample and then the file name. So we are going to concatenate and create another variable which we will call as file URI. Let's call this as prompt input file URI. Again, none is fine, string is fine. This is where we are going to create it. So if I go back to my Vertex AI, again we are trying to create this value here, which we are going to send to our prompt. So I'm just simply going to copy this and give this as a value, and then we will concatenate with the value which we have. So we will concatenate to this. So let's get this object ID out of this. So I'm going to create this, copy here, and create another variable, and this time the variable name will be create this. Now I have object ID from GCS. Now I need to concatenate it and make the output for this input URI. So it would be as simple as putting this and concatenating it with my object ID GCS. This is done, and I'm going to remap it to the same variable. Just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to create this variable here. So now, so far what we have done, we have a cloud PubSub trigger. This cloud PubSub trigger is getting the data out from the notification which PubSub is sending us whenever a file is created. We have got the prompt input file URI, which we have created a temp variable called as prompt input file URI. Now we are going to set this dynamically into the payload which we are sending, the request content which we are sending to our prompt, and we will replace this file URI. To do this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to utilize JavaScript function in application integration, and I'm going to create a JavaScript and put it here. To do, I'm going to make a temp variable for my input. This is the input which we want to replace. What I have done, I have created a placeholder like new file URI, and then this is what I'm going to use JavaScript, JSON, string manipulation and string replacement, and create a new one. So in application integration, you have this event object, and this event object provides you access to the variables which you can get. So this is the variable which we had, prompt input file URI, which is what we created in the previous step. And now we are going to replace the string into our object. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create content string, then JSON stringify the data which I have, and then replace new file URI with the new one, and then set it back into a temporary string, temporary variable request content temp. And this also I created as empty string variable which I can now fill with the new value. I could have directly put into request content, but just to show you that you can do this and how you will replace this, I wanted to do it as a secondary temp variable. Now to do the next part, I need another data mapper, which will be very simple data mapper. What this data mapper essentially is doing is going to take the temp variable which is coming from the JavaScript and then set that as a value which is going to the prompt. So let's go and do temp to main, and if I open this, now this time I'm going to get this temp variable here and then replace request.content. But now there is a problem that this is a string, but we need a JSON. So application integration provides you out of the box functions. You can very easily just go and do to JSON. Now this becomes a JSON value and we can replace this. So let's format it. So this is how it will look from Cloud PubSub. Whenever it triggers, we get the data out of the event message, manipulate the data and replace it in the object where we want to replace, put it back into the main content, and then the next mapping stays the same as our API trigger where we were manually inputting data and triggering it, and everything else stays the same. Now let's publish it. Once it is published, I'm going to upload a new file into my, so I'm going to go to my bucket here and upload another file. This time this file name is _scripts, and I open this. Now this file is going to get uploaded and the application integration will get triggered. So if I go back and go to the logs, so this time application integration got triggered, it was success. And if I open this, my PubSub data came, and the PubSub data had all the values which were sent by the Cloud PubSub message. I went to JavaScript, I manipulated the string data which I wanted to do, and I created a new file URI with temp underscore 6 value here. And then I called my POS Vertex AI prompt, and the Vertex AI responded back with green response. So that is what we wanted to do. So now we have created the whole dynamic way of triggering file upload and doing some prompt response from our Vertex AI. And as a next step, what I can also do, I can write this whole response to some Cloud PubSub, or I can write it to Cloud SQL. So sky is the limit. You can choose whichever use case fits your use case which you want to do, whatever downstream system you want to create, and hence you will be able to create the whole same end-to-end.